Forrest, where would you say that stress and sympathetic tone and cortisol really starts?
It's a great question. It's actually in a number of different places in your body, but one of the places that we can actually measure it is in your temporal lobe. And so you can actually find signals with EEG to get a baseline of these different areas of your brain that react differently when you have fight or flight. So when you're in sympathetic or parasympathetic, fight or flight, and the rest and digest state. And I think it's really important that when we have a signal of that, when we have a video, for lack of a better term, versus a snapshot, we can actually start seeing what impacts that out of a behavior on a daily basis. And that gives us a really good way to change behavior and understand what's working for you as an individual.
So sometimes these like cortisol responses or these stress responses, I mean, they can be environmental, they can be things that like trigger us, but then they can also be behavioral where they're sort of self-triggered, right? Where we can like our own habits or our own thoughts or our own things can like kind of trigger this. What are some ways that people can pattern interrupt that? Because I think a lot of people realize they're getting, oh gosh, like I can feel it. I feel I'm getting stressed. I feel my cortisol is high. It's almost like, yeah, you could prick your finger and know your cortisol is high. But a lot of people, if they're in tune with their body, they kind of know.
Yes.
Right? So what are these pattern interrupts, almost like stopgaps that people can put in place to say, hey, I need to reduce stress, maybe in an esoteric way that people aren't typically thinking?
So I would say that the best way that exists right now is breath work. You can actually interrupt a lot of the stress response that you have and get yourself out of that fight or flight by taking time to sit down and do breath work. And there's a number of different apps. We actually did some breath work last time I was here with you that I've carried on, and I do every day in the morning to set the tone for the day, so that we start the day from a foundation of rest and digest versus kind of the higher stress and easier to trigger. So getting more towards that red line kind of autonomic response. And but yeah, there's breath work is an amazing way to address this. One of the ones that we've seen from a technology standpoint and that we're very excited about is you have vagus nerve stimulation that you can use. So transcutaneous, which just means across your skin versus implanted in. You can use electrical signals to be able to stimulate your vagus nerve to be able to get yourself out of that fight or flight state. If you're noticing it coming, use this type of device to be able to trigger a rest and digest. And there's a lot of good literature behind this, but I think one of the ways that people can use without really heavy laboratory level equipment is something that they call in the medical literature time to sleep, or TTS, which is essentially when I put my head down to sleep, start the clock until I am asleep. How long does it take me? And what you find with people who are in this heavy fight or flight state is this is something where they can be, an hour and a half to 2 hours or even more. Anytime that you're above an hour and a half of time to sleep, typically that you have what's called ruminative thoughts, and you're in a fight or flight state. And that's something that really, you don't have an unlimited amount of time to sleep. Typically, people have to get up and do something. You have to go to work. You have to go kind of get your day going the next day. So it impacts your recovery time. It impacts the quality of sleep, but it also just impacts your recovery and your kind of baseline HRV numbers in general. And so the more you can do to reduce that time to sleep and get yourself out of ruminative thoughts, the better you're going to recover short term, and the better that's going to stack for you from a recovery standpoint long term. So every day that you have those ruminative thoughts, that you have a long time to sleep, you miss the recovery, you miss the cleaning of your brain, you have more waste products in your brain. There's really some additive issues that can come from that long term. And there's connective dots that carry all the way through to pathologies in the brain like Alzheimer's and dementia from having these type of waste materials not clear out of your brain and cause poorer function from a microvascular standpoint in your brain. So there's really kind of on one end negative impacts, but if you are able to trigger yourself, whether it's through breath work or through using the newer technologies for stimulating your vagus nerve and get your time to sleep down, there's really an upside for that. So you're going to see your cognitive performance go up. You're going to see your training recovery go up. This is really a foundational piece for living a healthy life.
Let's, mechanistically, I'm very intrigued. What happens with vagal tone and the vagus nerve. You know, we know of the gut brain axis. We know of like these kinds of things, but people throw the term like vagal tone and you know, vagus nerve stimulation. They throw that stuff around. But what is actually happening mechanistically there?
So functionally, your vagus nerve is a connection point between your organs and your brain. And we think of it as your brain driving your organs, but your organs are actually transmitting 80% of the traffic. So if you think about the highway, the gut and the liver and everything that you have from your organ standpoint, communicating back to the brain is 80% of that traffic. So it's not necessarily just the brain saying, you guys do this, it's your organs communicating back to your brain.
It's an interpretation.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's a feedback loop as well. So, you know, we actually came across it from we were developing, and we'll be launching later this year, a gut-based laser therapy product. And one of the things that happens in your brain from gut-based treatment with lasers is you have a number of neurotransmitters that increase.
I have one on.
Oh, yes.
Five right now, but yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, this guy.
So when you're treating your gut, we use lasers versus LEDs because you have to penetrate in, and we use 4 different wavelengths of actually 3 different wavelengths of near infrared light, and then 1 of red. And it's a very interesting thing because the red actually doesn't penetrate far enough through to the gut to really, from a dosing standpoint, do much there, but it still makes a big difference in the outcomes. So we include it. But one of the things that we noticed with our early studies is when you treat the gut, you see neurotransmitters like BDNF, and you can kind of think that as a proxy for the neuroplasticity, and then other serotonin, dopamine. We see those increase in the brain. Your gut actually produces these as well, but they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So those that are produced in your gut don't come and influence the brain. But we still see a lift in the brain when your gut is healthy. And for about 15 to 17% of the people we were treating the gut, we didn't see that lift. And so it was a very kind of difficult one to solve. So we started peeling the onion back on that a little bit. And what we see is people who are in a fight or flight state, their vagus nerve it's like a highway just locked up. It's not, there's no traffic going anywhere. And so they weren't getting the brain lift that we'd like to see out of them from a neurotransmitter standpoint. And what we found is when we can get them onto protocols like good breath work and vagus nerve stimulation, that unlocks the highway, for lack of a better term, and allows them to see those neurotransmitter increases in the brain from having treated the gut directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So essentially the vagus nerve is interpreting, getting feedback from all these, you know, external things that are happening. Mm-hmm. And it's like a super highway sending a signal up to the brain that basically says, you know, this is how you need to interpret this data and do something with it. So we almost need to flip everything on its head from what we think, where the brain is really just, our body is like this antenna that's receiving signals constantly, and our brain is a computer that's interpreting that and then just giving a desired output based upon the feedback that it gets. Like
that's exactly it. And what a great, concise way to say it, because I think we get so stuck in the biochemistry of this from a research standpoint that it's often something that's missed, but that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
So essentially what does someone mean when they say your quote unquote vagal tone? Is that just like someone kind of in that locked up state or not?
So I've seen it used and misused in a couple of different ways, but I think what they're referring to is, at least from the medical literature for this, is the signaling, the electrical signaling that you see from this vagus nerve. And there's different ways of measuring that. Typically, most of the more accurate ways that we've seen kind of historically from a medical research standpoint have been clamps. So they're kind of invasive. One of the things that's really exciting from a technology standpoint right now is vagus nerve kind of activity electrically maps back against EEG electrical information that we can take from the brain, but it's really difficult to get get anyone in the real world to go take an EEG cap and wear it around, and they've been very expensive. One of the things that's been developed recently, and it's very exciting, and we started seeing very compelling data out of, is ear EEGs. So when your vagus nerve comes up, it branches off both inside and then outside of your ear. And what we're able to do with that is get a 97 to 98% accurate read on what your brain's doing, particularly the temporal lobe, which is most highly associated with your autonomic nervous system. We can actually read this back against what would be happening from an EEG of the brain. And so that gives us a really good way so that we don't have to go invasively in, cut your neck, and then clamp the actual vagus nerve. We can put an ear EEG in or around or both, and get really solid data on what's happening with your temporal lobe from an electrical standpoint.
Is that why when people get stressed out, they tend to clench their jaw or get really tight through here? Is it just the fact that it's all kind of like ending up there, or is that just a random coincidence?
That's a great question. I don't know. We do see it highly correlated, but I don't know that anyone's dug into this to really
keep clenching, or like all these things that kind of manifest right there, right?
Yes, that's it. And also, it's one of the things that we see with good kind of breathwork and meditation programs is how to move your awareness to these areas where you do have that clenching and find a way to release it, because it's really helpful, because that's also indicative back to your brain that, hey, we're not in danger as much. And I think that's one of the reasons what we find using conscious behavior through your meditation and your breath work, you can actually trigger that satellite that you mentioned of these external pieces of your body to release, and then use that as a feedback loop to your brain that, hey, we're not in this, we're not being chased by a tiger. Somebody sent me a nasty email. We're not going to die from that. Yeah. Let's get ourselves back into a kind of rest and digest, and in a more manageable way to kind of interact on that email that has kind of triggered the fight or flight versus the tiger in the jungle, which is kind of what it was meant for evolutionarily.
Yeah, a real-time threat versus being attached to your thoughts as a threat. Right?
That's it.
Like a real-time physical, this is actually go time, versus this may or may not be something, and I am projecting with probably a distorted predictive value of what's actually going to happen.
That's exactly.
How does light impact our nerve? So like the vagus nerve, obviously a nerve. You do a lot of work with light, but I'm just curious in general, like, are there mitochondria in the nerve? Are there like, what's going on? Like how do we actually affect it? How does this nerve, and for the viewers and listeners here, like, how does the signal actually work through the nerve, and how does it get disrupted, and what might signal it to tighten up? And then like, how does the mitochondria play into this? How does cytochrome C oxidase and potentially red light play into it?
So the red light helps. It is not as impactful as the electrical stimulation. So the electrical stimulation actually works shorter term in a larger impact from again, kind of the impacts on the overall system from a nervous system. What we do see is a long-term impact for reducing that fight or flight state from, and really with the nervous system, it's been more impacted by treating gut and brain tissue than it has necessarily by treating the vagus nerve with light.
Yeah.
So the vagus nerve with electrical stimulation is really impactful. And again, we can, with one treatment, I started on this early, and I don't think I followed through on the impact on time to sleep. With a single treatment of transcutaneous electrical stimulation, we see people go from an hour and a half to 2 hours of time to sleep down to 5 minutes. And they have to keep that ongoing. Those benefits are more transient, where the red light treatment, those are more additive. So you see those smaller impacts, but really additive over time, where the electrical impacts are more transient, but larger. So there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of stack for this, and that we'd love to see people stacking is treating gut and brain with light, because you see really powerful a number of different impacts, but I would say mitochondrial is a very big one. And so diving into that first, there's a couple of different things that we impact with light on the mitochondrial level. Cytochrome C oxidase is a bottleneck for production in your electron transport chain, and we see up to a 60 to 80% increase in ATP production over a 10 to 12 hour period in your mitochondria. And this is oftentimes the higher end of that. So the 80% end of that is people who have some level of mitochondrial dysfunction. So metabolic disorder, diabetes, prediabetes, things like this. The lower end of that is going to be people who are, but it's still a massive impact on your mitochondrial energy production. So the downstream impacts from mitochondrial energy production are, you see mitochondrial retrograde signaling. So everything in your body, every compound, every chemical, every molecule in your body serves multiple purposes. And so what we see when we increase that ATP production, one of the ways that we're doing it is that we're parsing nitric oxide from binding to that cytochrome C oxidase. When you parse that nitric oxide, that's a signaling point for oxidative stress outside of the mitochondria, but still inside your cell. So we see oxidative stress increase slightly, kind of like working out. Like when you exercise, you increase your oxidative stress in your cells, but you also teach your cells how to take that oxidative stress and reduce it back down below baseline. And so over time, you see that baseline get lower and lower, and the oxidative stress comes into a more manageable or a healthier state. There are a number of different things that we impact with neurological tissue in specific, but I think really the biggest benefits you see out of this are going to be the larger kind of mitochondrial impacts and then cardiovascular impacts. And so just to kind of touch on the cardiovascular side of things briefly, nitric oxide and removing those nitric oxide bonds from cytochrome C oxidase is one. You have a copper core in cytochrome C oxidase. And one of the things that we see, people are often ask about the different, like, how is this light impacting this and what is it doing and why is it doing this? One of the ones that we give as an example for this that I think is a really powerful kind of example is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin's very, very chemically similar to chlorophyll. And so chlorophyll being that kind of light acceptor that allows all life on this planet, hemoglobin, we see these iron cores, these heme cores, be impacted by the heme cores and copper cores in different molecules in the body are impacted by the infrared light. And one of the things that we see from that is that it parses this or removes these bonds of nitric oxide. So when you remove the nitric oxide bond, it dumps nitric oxide into your blood. And when you do that, nitric oxide is a vasodilator. And so you see what happens with your cardiovascular endothelial tissue is it expands out and allows more blood through. So you get the benefit of two major things there, is expanding the blood flow, delivering more blood more effectively. But those hemoglobin, when you take the nitric oxide, those binding sites can also bind oxygen. So when you remove nitric oxide, binding oxygen in and delivering more blood through, and more blood with oxygen just means you're going to be able to perform more effectively cardiovascularly. So when you combine that with the mitochondrial work that's going on within your cells, you actually get this on two different levels that work synergistically. So you start delivering oxygen more effectively, and you start using that oxygen more effectively within the cells.
And that vasodilation, I imagine, would allow for more cerebral blood flow as well. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the most exciting things about this, because there's some really crazy, nasty pathologies in the brain. And I don't know if you've been around Alzheimer's, but it's a really nasty pathology. Not just the individual and the patient who's suffering it, but for their families and everyone around them. There's just really a nasty kind of impact overall from that. But what we've seen very recently is that historically, the medical community has looked at this as a protein plaque issue in the brain. What we're finding is that it's not a protein plaque issue in the brain, it's a microvascular issue in the brain. And when you can improve microvascular performance in the brain, you actually see cognitive benefits from that, where we've actually, with pharmaceuticals now, removed a ton of the plaque. You don't see any cognitive benefits returning.
No, it's interesting. Like, the plaque thing is interesting. I was just talking to Dom D'Agostino about this, where it's like that's potentially even like an infection response that's happening somewhere else in the body. So it actually could be potentially protective.
Yes.
Yeah, but we still don't know.
Yes, that's it. But one of the things we were talking with Karen from our friend from the supplement company Just Thrived, who's a biochemist, and they've been doing a ton of data. And they one of the things that we see with a number of these different dementias and Alzheimer's in the brain is people increasingly referring to them as type 3 diabetes, where it's really a problem that starts in the gut, and you start leaking inflammation out of the gut, and you start seeing short-term problems from that. So your immune system takes a hit. You start seeing more autoimmune disorders like multiple sclerosis and asthma and a number of different kind of autoimmune disorders that are increasing year on year. But what it really is your gut, those tight junctions not being tight enough, and you're leaking inflammation into the rest of the body. And so the long-term impact of that is you end up with endotoxins in the brain causing this type 3 diabetes that's really being driven by gut issues. But it's it's a long cycle, and so it's not very intuitive. So people, you see this years and years of inflammation trickling out, and really kind of foundational gut issues being there, causing these brain kind of neurological disorders longer term. And it's great that we can kind of start naming it and putting more attention on it, because it allows us to start building and addressing it with better technological and behavioral solutions.
So if we come back full circle to sort of the, even the cortisol and the vagal tone and all this, can the gut inflammation be a part of this, right? Is there a connection between the actual gut itself, not just the superhighway between the gut and the brain?
100%. Yes. Yeah. So when you start treating your gut, you do see recovery improve. You do see, and again, this is one of the things where treating the gut, particularly with light, at the correct wavelengths. And again, these are typically a little bit longer, still near infrared, but typically a little bit longer wavelengths because you're penetrating through more tissue to get there. And it's a very interesting, we spent a ton of time building dosing models on how to deliver the photons as effectively as possible to these different photoacceptors. And it's a great problem to have, kind of just to go build these out, and very exciting to see it getting better and better as we test it and try it. But yeah, you do see HRV numbers changing from that. You do see these different temporal lobe and vagus nerve and essentially autonomic electrical signaling changes over time. And those are additive. Those are the ones where I mentioned that treating transcutaneously to the vagus nerve, short-term impact, more transient impact, you have to kind of do it daily. If you are treating your gut daily, though, these are additive things that you just see people getting better and better with over time. So it's a really exciting space to be in right now.
So what about potential even supplementation? Can people look at, if we're kind of coming full circle and saying, okay, reducing cortisol, reducing that time to sleep, actionable takeaways. Obviously, we talk about the, vagus nerve stimulation. We talk about kind of that whole avenue. What are some other things besides like the breath work and that, like anything? I've seen some interesting stuff on glycine and any other thing in even the supplement or potentially food category.
So there are, again, we've been talking with some different supplement companies about this, but spore-based probiotics have shown very good impact for this. The dietary and training piece is huge. So whole food diet, kind of non-processed foods is a major thing that really helps kind of, again, we talk about those tight junctions in the gut and kind of shoring those up. You talk about the mucosal lining of the gut being as healthy as possible, so just so you have less inflammation leaking into the body, and training. So really kind of those oxidative stress signaling pathways that I mentioned, where you want to put stress in these pathways so that it kind of teaches a healthy stress, so that it teaches your body to be able to respond to those and bring it back into a healthy range once it gets below baseline. So those are really kind of the foundational pieces. And that's probably not telling anyone that what they don't know is, eat whole foods, and train effectively, but you're training your metabolic. So much of this comes back down to metabolic dysfunction or impairment, or the spectrum from metabolic impairment to metabolic efficacy. And so the more you can get yourself to metabolic efficacy, and the more energy that you're able to manage and produce from a throughput standpoint, and also your flexibility metabolically. And we see this in the brain as well. Your brain is one of the most redundant systems from an energy standpoint, because if you're out of energy for whatever reason, so okay, I can only use kind of aerobic metabolic pathways for my arm, and we're out of that for the day. If you can't use your arm, you're kind of okay. It's going to come back once you eat and get back into it. If parts of your brain stop working, you're not okay. And so there are redundancies from a metabolic standpoint in the brain that are becoming better and better understood with kind of the lactate shuttle and glycolytic pathways and all of this. So all of that to say, if you are metabolically flexible, we see a really big benefit for your recovery and kind of your vagal tone and
yeah, you're not getting into that state of I'm like in deep stressed, right? So it's able to not going to trigger that tone.
That's it.
What about what's your take on, again, you're super smart on everything light related. I had interesting conversations with you. If we come back to like cytochrome C oxidase, what's your take on, methylene blue as a photosynthetic, and potentially, I mean, is there an application where that could actually reduce vagal tone because you're increasing sort of the donor and acceptor of an electron?
Yeah, we do see, so it's kind of a two-edged sword, a double-edged sword there. When you see people who are in a little bit better metabolic health, it looks like it's working really well. And I've tried it and seen really good benefits from it personally, even in near-term kind of just tracking for affect and kind of cognitive performance on a daily basis. One of the things that we see though with a broader population is the phospholipid issues that people have in their metabolic phospholipid bilayer is really the bigger issue. And so you want to treat those and kind of your cellular kind of layers and kind of phospholipid bilayers, and then the mitochondrial ones as well. If those are unhealthy, revving up the engine when the engine's not kind of 100% there and not performing at its best is really not great. And so that's where you see people having these issues of kind of, and we have seen a number of people
increase ROS.
Yes, yeah. That's it. But it is a great tool in the right place. And I think there's a number of different, functional medicine doctors and people who take integrative approaches to medicine that are starting to use this very effectively. But I think the main thing for that I would caution on is make sure that you're metabolically healthy in the first place. And, there's some baseline kind of measurements you can do for that. And then there's also some supplements that you can do for helping with that kind of phospholipid bilayer. And I'm going to butcher this because I always do, but
Phosphatidylcholine or phosphatidylserine?
Yes. Yes, that's right. For some reason, I cannot pronounce that for the life of
me. That's started to be shown to be a pretty powerful, just neuroprotectant as well. So very interesting. This is the third time it's come out. I was at a longevity conference this weekend, a health span conference. I actually got to meet, I'm going to have the head of the NIH on this channel, which is going to be interesting.
That's awesome.
And essentially, like this is the third time it's come up in 24 hours is phosphatidylcholine, and both things kind of in the context of like a neuroprotectant. So this is really interesting. So you think from like setting the cell up for success, or just from is it?
Yeah, set it up for success first. Do that for a couple of months, and then if you're considering a kind of methylene blue and these type of things to rev the engine faster, let's make sure that the engine's solid first, and a couple of months of that, and again, training. I'm a big proponent of training. I would say with the caveat not to come do it with you every day, because that would that would kill most people. It's taking a good chunk out of my brain power today, but it's a get your training base up and start to treat your body like the kind of and this is I get chuckles about this, but like the meat machine that it is, and maintain it well, and build the engine, maintain the engine as effectively as you can, and then start revving it up at full blast. Yeah, start redlining it there. Yeah.
Well, Forrest, where can everyone find your work, your products? I'm obviously, like I mentioned before, like I've used your products for years, really good stuff, but where can everyone find you?
We're at Kineon, Kineon.io, and we have a blog there that we maintain to try to educate a little bit more about laser and red light therapy, and what it can do for you, and setting reasonable expectations, I think is the key. We see a lot of people out there kind of making claims and under delivering on those, and we really try to do the opposite of that of let's set reasonable expectations for people and let them know that this isn't kind of that short-term huge impact, transient impact. This is something that stacks over time and can really help you set that foundation from a healthy mitochondria and a healthy metabolic function, and a healthy gut, and just so many places in the body that can reduce. And reducing inflammation is just an amazing kind of high leverage point for interacting with the body. And that's where they can come check us out, Kineon.io.
Right on, man. Yeah, your products are awesome. I'll link out to everything down below, and with a special discount link too. So
thanks so much.
Thanks, man.